quite a few. So in a lot of cases, in some cases, material objects can be included, as is mentioned there, works of art, rituals, ceremonies, the tools used in those, and so on and so forth. But what we're talking about today is our values, our value systems, our beliefs. Those influence how we think about money and how we think about finances and how we plan for those finances and how that affects our families. And so that's what we're going to get into. So when we talk about levels of cultural knowledge, as you can see, we use this uh, visual representation of a tree to kind of talk about, you see at the top, the surface culture, and then you see kind of towards the middle on the left, the shallow culture, which may be the trunk of the tree, and then getting lower to the roots, you see the deep culture. So when we talk about the surface culture, that's when we talk about what's listed there, on the leaves, the things you can see on the surface of the tree, art, games, dance, food, music, holidays. That's the stuff that we can see, the literature, the traditions. So we say that's surface level, right? If someone wants to understand the Hispanic Latino community, that's the surface level stuff. So then now going a little bit deeper, going kind of a little bit further, the shallow culture, the unspoken rules, right? The emotional impact, kind of what are the unspoken rules in the Hispanic culture? What do we call those? What are those? You have to talk to family to get those unspoken rules. You have to maybe go ask abuelita, right? So the concept of time, right? Like, if we say the party starts at 5, we understand, okay, people might show up at 7. Okay, it's all right. Okay, that it's still okay, right? It's still okay. So things like that, right? The concept of time, right? We kind of really don't have a concept of time. Eye contact, right? We of course want to look everybody in the eye and have eye contact, especially with the older folks, especially with the folks we respect, right? Personal space. There's really kind of no personal space. Everybody's family, right? We give everybody hugs. Even guys, right? Guys give their guy friends hugs, right? I mean, that's just how it is, right? Because everybody's family, and so those are kind of the unspoken rules. Those are kind of the shallow culture stuff. Now we go a little deeper, the deep cultural stuff, the unconscious rules, the stuff that's way back in there, the intense emotional impact stuff. Now we're talking about group identity. We're talking about social interaction. We're talking about patterns of decision making. And so these are the things that we really don't think a lot about, but these are the things that happen to us. These are the things that affect our decision making. And sometimes we know why, and sometimes we know where these things come from, and sometimes we don't. Even if we were to talk to Abuelita, we still may not get a clear answer as to why this is the way it is, or how did this become to be the way it is. We're not sure, right? But we just know this is the group identity, or we just know this is how we do this social interaction, or we just know that this is our decision making when it comes to this or that, right? And that's just how it is. And so, because that's part of our culture, we may or may not know why or how, but that's just part of our culture. So So that can influence our decision making, and including when we think about money and finances and how that affects our family. And so we're going to get into that. Okay, so very briefly, we talk about the cultural scripts. So as I mentioned, these are shared beliefs and values and attitudes that shape how people live, interact, and make decisions and communicate. They can work simultaneously or separately and are learned behavior. So kind of going back to that cultural part, these are learned behaviors. That's going to be relevant here in just a minute. And they can limit or enhance our actions and are deployed selectively. So again, thinking about that, they can limit or enhance our actions. So again, if we know how to recognize these cultural scripts or these beliefs, these values, these behaviors, if we can recognize them, and then if we know how to use them, whether to our advantage or not, then they can either limit or enhance our actions, right? So if you think about this in a monetary or a finance perspective, which we will in just a few minutes, if I can recognize a behavior that's either good or bad, then I can take action that will either limit or enhance my finances, right? Based off of that action. So we're going to get into some examples of that. Okay, so this is an example of a cultural script. There are many cultural scripts, but we're just going to cover two of them today, just to give you all examples. But familismo is one. So this one is related to collectivism. It's familism. It's emphasized the strong identification and bond with immediate and extended family. So what that means is Latinos portray feelings of loyalty, mutuality, dependence, and unity with all the group members, right? So it doesn't matter if it's your third, fourth, or fifth cousin that's still your cousin, right? It doesn't matter if it's just your neighbor. You probably refer to him as your primo, right? Even though he's not your primo, he's just your neighbor, right? You're gonna call him your primo, or you're gonna call him your compadre, right? Even if he's just your neighbor. I have a member of my family that does that. Every single person she knows is the compadre. So we really don't, no one knows really who's actually blood and who's not, because every single person she knows is compadre. And so we're just, everyone's always confused and we just go, okay. So we don't know, right? But that's just the way it is, right? Everybody's family. So it's that feeling of loyalty and unity with all the group members, right? That's familismo. Related to collectivism, which prioritizes the needs of the group before the needs of the individual, right? So this is another facet of this value, is that they prioritize the needs of the group before the needs of themselves. So this can be seen. An example of this is when a child is let's say a high schooler is about to graduate and they may have the opportunity to go away to a good college. They may even have a full ride. But some family members, some older family members may say, well, mijito, mijita, we really need you to stay and get a job. We need you to work because we need you to help pay the bills, right? And they may do that. They may stay and help pay the bills, get a job and help pay the bills because the family asked them to do that. That's better for the family instead of what's better for them. Right. So, and it may not just be their immediate family, mom, dad, brother, sister, and them. It may be they live in a household with grandma and grandpa, and maybe a cousin or two, or an aunt or two, or a second cousin, or maybe a niece or nephew running around, whatever. It's some extended family in there too. It doesn't matter. They're all just family, right? And so it's whatever's best for the family. So that actually happens a lot more than we realize. And some of us may even know some of those situations firsthand. So that's familismo. Here's a question. We won't have a discussion. I'm not sure who all is out there, but just something to think about and we can move on. But from 1 to 10, how would you rate the influence of familismo in your financial planning expectations? So, for example, I know that in the Hispanic culture, it's always been uh, well, there's been different responses or different answers, different reasons not to save money, not to invest money, right? You can't trust the banks, right? Don't save your money. You can't trust the banks. Well, really is, I mean, I don't know, is the bank really going to steal from you? I don't know. Or don't buy CDs. You can't trust the government. Well, I don't know. Has the government not ever paid any CDs? I don't know. But right. But so there's, I mean, those are just a few examples, but there's always, in the Latino culture, they're always weary of outsiders, right? Weary of the government or whoever, the big corporations, the bank, right? So you shouldn't invest, you shouldn't save, right? But I'm sure there are other examples. Some of you may have heard those examples. You may have heard other examples, um, but but if you hear those types of discussions from older family members, the old school family members, you're likely to pay attention and you're likely to follow and obey, right? And so if you're not likely to save your money or invest your money, then you're more likely to just spend it, right? And then later in life, you don't have any. You don't have any saved. You don't have any invested. So that's just one example.
Yeah, it's something that I have seen, right? It's
Hmm.
the investing. There's not a lot of education
Hmm.
in investing, right? And it's familismo in a way
Hmm.
to where um it's not something that you see in your family, so it's not passed down, right? There's not conversation. But
Right.
also in familismo, like you tend to not move away, so you base where you're gonna live, the economy, so almost like you want to move to a town where your mom and your family is, so you don't move away for career progression or better jobs or anything else. So
Right.
you limit your career or
Yeah,
your
you're
family.
kind of you're locked into that cycle, right? And like you said, you stump yourself, you stump your career and your potential for growth, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because the family told you they want you close, right?
Yeah.
So you stay in the neighborhood or you stay on that side of town and you
Yeah.
stay with that minimum wage paying job or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? Because you didn't go to college because like you could have or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I remembered another one. Sometimes you hear, "Oh no, 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 you don't want to go get a financial education because then that's more you have to worry about." Right?
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard that one before. The more you know, the more you have to worry about.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have worries in your life. You don't want to worry about that stuff. So you don't want to learn about those things because then you have to worry about those things, right? So I've heard
Yeah.
that one before too, right? It's
And
like,
then don't pay for insurance. Why are you paying for insurance? If you
yeah,
get sick, just go to the pharmacy and buy something. You
right,
pay for
exactly. Yeah,
insurance,
yeah.
you're just giving the money.
Right, just give them the money. Yeah. So there's a thousand and one excuses out there, right, that we've all heard from the older generations, and so those kind of affect our decision making, or they can affect our decision making. So okay, so moving on to our second one, presente, which of course means present, emphasizing the importance of working for the present moment and the day-to-day needs. And this is another one, this is another way that us as Hispanics, Latinos kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. In a way, it's good, but like everything, right? It's a double-edged sword. So Latino community work towards day-to-day responsibilities. We do not believe in abundance, meaning there's still, even to this day, a lot of Hispanics, Latinos who don't believe there's enough for everyone, right? There's enough to go around. There's still a lot of us that believe, oh no, I'm good with what I have. I'm okay with what I have because what I have is enough for me, right? That I shouldn't want any more because that would be bad to want more, right? Because then I might be taking that away from somebody else, right? And so that's one way that kind of expresses itself. Also, decisions are made collectively and for the prompt moment. A scarcity mindset is prominent. So again, that kind of goes with this the scarcity mindset. Instead of the abundance mindset, there's the scarcity mindset. So, but if we think about that, if we think about somebody who actually has success in life, who might actually have wealth, who might actually have financial success, and financial means, they always think opposite. They think abundance. They think there's enough out there for everybody, including me. I can go make money. I can go find money. I can go make money 100 different ways. and I'll be good. And you know what? Everybody else will still be fine too. And that's okay. And that's great. And that's the way of the world. And so, but not us as Latinos. We think, no, 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 I've got my little house, I've got my 25-year-old car, and I'm good. I don't want to change anything. I'm all right. I've got my minimum wage paying job and I've found a way, I've figured out a way to support my 5 kids with that, and I'm okay with that. And that's how we think, and that's okay, and so again, it's the mindset. It's the mindset. So again, we try to educate folks about changing that mindset that there is abundance and it's okay, it's fine. You can go out there and there's enough for everyone, and it's okay to work for more, and that's fine. So another question here, what's the one action, expectation, or behavior that you attribute to the presente cultural script? And so we kind of talked about a couple of them there. Danitza, feel free to chime in here if you can think of something, but kind of going back to that presente cultural script. And I'll bring it up here for working for the moment, and I'll kind of give you one example of what I talked about at the symposium back in December was us as Latinos. We're so family oriented, and we're so celebration oriented because everybody's family, right? We love to party. So every week or every 2 weeks, there's some sort of celebration going on, right? And so that's what we think about. That's what we plan for. We think about all the money we have to spend for the quinceañera in 2 weeks, and then for the wedding 2 weeks after that, and then for the birthday party, 2 weeks after that, and then for the other wedding 2 weeks after that, and for the other quinceañera 2 weeks after. We don't think about the long-term planning because we have all these celebrations coming up in the immediate future that we have to plan for, and that we spend money on, lots of money, because those are big celebrations, right? And so we don't plan for the long term, like retirement. And so that's the example I gave at the symposium. But I don't know if you can think of any others yourself,
I
Danny.
am I am just over here just giggling
Yeah,
because that is so true.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't I don't know, and I'm giggling because that is so true. We live in the present, we live in the moment,
Hmm.
and in Western culture, right? We call it living paycheck to paycheck,
Hmm.
but in Latino community, we are happy, right? We are
Hmm.
happy, we celebrate, and we go to work and we collect our paycheck el fin de semana, el viernes. And on Sunday, we do the carne asada and we party and we
Hmm.
have the money and then we celebrate the birthdays and we go all out. We invite the entire neighborhood and we have food and party and we're happy. And that's just that week, right? And like you said, we don't save and have money and just we're not frugal, right? Because we siempre decimos like oh, está bien, todo está bien, God will provide, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and it's not to say that's wrong or bad. If we think about the older generation that did that, right? Okay, maybe, let's say our grandparents or maybe even a generation before that, and that's how they spent their entire lives spending their money, right? From one pachanga to the next, to the next, to the
Hmm.
next, to the next. And then when they were older, they had very little money. Yeah, they could survive and they could live, but they still had very little money, relatively compared to everybody else, right? And sometimes they might struggle to make ends meet, and a lot of times they couldn't afford this or that or this or that, but they were still okay, right? But they weren't well off. They were probably happy their entire lives. And okay, well, great, that's good. Good for them. That's fine. But why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't we have both? And that's what we're trying to communicate to people. That's what we're trying to get people to think about is you can have both. You can have the short-term planning and the long-term planning. That's good. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't only have to plan for the short term. You can plan for the long term at the same time. And that'll help you out in the long term. So that's the point we're trying to get across. And so we're going to
Yeah,
kind of,
and
yeah.
yeah, 100%. And I think
Mhm.
that, and my husband and I were having a discussion, and we're
Mhm.
like, we're beginning to see in this millennial generation, right? More outspoken, more knowledgeable. When we are seeing the millennials, right, beginning to
Mhm.
realize what does generational wealth means and
Right.
how it's being
Yeah.
almost like weaponized, the quote unquote like ignorance of
Mhm.
like previous generations not knowing what the lack of generational wealth is doing to us, right? For not
Right.
planning for the future, right? And not doing that, how it's being weaponized against us because the lack of education, right? How much you get paid and all of those things. But yeah, it is. We don't plan for the future. Like you said, it's not a bad thing, but it does limit us. And even in the military, right? And the
Mhm.
military, serving as a non-citizen, it limits you how high you can progress in ranks, right? What jobs you can apply for, because of the clearances, because how long you can serve, right? So even in that aspect, right, it does limit us at some certain level. So it is some limitations. So
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And you brought up another good point, the generational wealth. And there's a lot of I don't know what you call it, documentaries that you can see on TV, like on the History Channel and on YouTube about these families that have generational wealth. And you see that the people who started the generational wealth, whoever they were, they spent their lives teaching their children and grandchildren about money, and they would have conversations about it. They would talk about it, not just once or twice, but all the time. And so their children learned, the grandchildren learned, and all these generations learned about money. So the money stayed in the family. That's generational wealth. And if you contrast that to us as Hispanics, Latinos, what do we talk about? Well, we talk about pretty much anything and everything except that. We don't talk about money, right? We talk about the party, we talk about the dresses, we talk about the shoes, we talk about the beer, we talk about hunting, we talk about the barbecuing, we talk about anything and everything except money and how to make money, how to save money,
and
how to
we talk
invest
about
money.
hard work.
Yeah, we talk about hard work.
We
Yeah.
talk about hard work. We talk about
Yeah.
always being like
Hmm.
punctual. We talk about like doing all of the work, but never about what does the work generate, right?
Right.
What does the
Yeah.
work generate? What is the
Yeah.
fruit of the work?
Yeah, and that's true, but one of the downsides to that working harder is that even though working harder is good, I'm not saying don't work hard. Working hard is good and important, but working hard only gets you so far. At a certain point in time, you have to start working smarter, which is again what these generational wealth people did. People like Henry Ford or Andrew Carnegie, right? I mean, what they did is, yes, they did work hard, but at a certain point in time, they switched over to working smarter, right? Meaning they opened a business or they founded a business or they created a business or an enterprise of some sort, right? And then they grew that. And so they basically went entrepreneurial and so,
Yeah.
in order to expand. And so that's how they work smarter. But if there's a Hispanic or a Latino that's only gonna have a job that pays X and it's hardly ever gonna go above X, then yeah, they might have a good living and they can support their families and that's great, but they're never gonna get to generational wealth. And so there's just a difference that people need to understand there is, you can support your family on a job, on a salary, which is all well and good and fine, and that's great. But if you want to create generational wealth, that's a completely different mindset. That's a totally different education. You have to go the way, you have to understand the likes of Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie and those types of individuals and study them and see what they did and how they did it. And you have to basically kind of follow in their footsteps. Guys like uh, Jeff Bezos and those kinds of, that's somebody in today's world uh, Jack Ma, those guys. You have to see what they did and how they did it in order to create generational wealth. They started off at a job, all those guys, but then they transitioned into entrepreneurial status and then creating an enterprise and expanding that enterprise. And so that's a different discussion, but anyway, but kind of going back to how our culture, well, that does kind of talk about how our culture affects our decision making in terms of finances, because as you mentioned, um, our culture tells us work harder, which means we kind of stay in that job. We kind of keep ourselves in that job, which is fine if we're able to propel our kids further, right? To maybe break out of that job world and into entrepreneurial world and into generational wealth model. So working hard is good, but at some point, if you want to get to generational wealth, you have to transition that mindset. So. Okay, so we're talking about now the true picture. It's not that we don't know how it is, it's just that it's not a natural behavior or expectation in the community, which is just what we were talking about. As you said, Danitza, it's work harder. So in our community, in our culture, if we work harder, well, then what happens then? Well, we make a little bit more, so we work harder, right? Because we got that reward to make a little bit more. So we work harder, so we make a little bit more, so we work harder. So that cycle continues, right? So if the cycle continues, we never break out of it. We never break out of it into something that is where we're able to create generational wealth. We stay in that cycle. And again, that may be fine and good if we support our families, then we're a success. That's okay. But if what we actually want is something different, then we have to have a different mindset. And the topic of financial success or planning is not a common or everyday discussion topic, as we already mentioned. As us Hispanics or Latinos, you name the topic, we'll talk about anything and everything except money, right? I mean, we have chisme galore, right? We have chisme about anybody, everybody, anything, but money. Don't know the first thing about finances, don't know the first thing about investing, don't know the first thing about entrepreneurship, don't know the first thing about return on investment, nothing, right? And so where does that leave us? Well, that
And I
leaves us
will
in that
say
cycle.
that, I'm sorry, but I will
No, go
say
ahead.
that sometimes even if somebody is even beginning to speak about money,
Hmm.
empiezan a decir, mira el presumido, mira ese, right?
Hmm. Right.
It's almost like you're ashamed, like
Yes. Right.
about it,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
now
Hmm.
because you're
Yeah.
speaking about money, so they
Yeah.
take it as you're talking about all the money you have. It was
Yeah.
like, so even
Yes.
you're ashamed about talking about this
That's right. Yes. And I've seen that as well. Growing up, I saw that. Yeah, you're shamed for being successful. You're shamed for knowing something, for having smarts, right? For being educated,
Yes,
for acting smartly. You're
yes,
shamed for that, right?
yeah.
Right? Who do they think they are? Look at the money they
Hmm.
have. Look, they got a brand new car. They were able to buy a
Yeah,
new house, right? Who do they think they are, right? Oh, we saw that all the time, didn't we? Right? We heard that
yeah.
all the time. So again, it's that mindset. Those people thinking that way are basically backwards. I mean, are they
Yes,
any
and it's
better? Right?
basically like keeping us down. It's like we
Right.
keeping ourselves down.
Exactly. Right. That's the mindset of the culture is keep everybody down, right? Keep everybody basically poor, right? So we're all the same because it's that mindset of there's not enough to go around. So everybody needs to be kind of down in the dumps like we are, and then everybody's equal, and then everybody's the same. That's equality right there. If everybody's down in the dumps with me, then everybody's equal, right? That's equality. As
Yeah,
opposed
we're all
to yeah, as opposed to no, there's enough for everybody to go around, right? So yeah. So again, it's the mindset. We've got to change that mindset. So, okay. So now talking about diversity in the community, there are layers of cultural identity, and this is something that affects us today. This is coming out more and more prominent as the days go on in current society. So, for example, these are all the different ways that we can distinguish ourselves, our birthplace, our lineage, our generation, our immigration status, our language, and our identity. So, as an example, I can say I'm a native-born American. Uh, I think I'm a Gen Xer. I think I'm an Xer. I can't remember. 1980. Um, non-immigrant English speaking or
If you're a Gen Xer, because I'm at 81, I'm like both. I have one like Gen X and
yeah.
I'm another foot of millennial. So I'm like in the middle, but I claim Gen X.
Yeah, Gen X. Yeah, and then you can. Yeah, and I'm also going down to language. I'm also a bilingual Latino, right? So there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven different ways that at least these are minimum here that people can identify today, right? So some of these may or may not kind of play into financial thinking, but if you think back to the cultural, uh, there may be some of those deep-rooted ways that these affect our thinking and our decision making. So, for example, just somebody else could say, well, I'm a foreign-born, let's say Brazilian uh, Gen Zer immigrant bilingual Latino, right? Or Chicano or Latinx or whatever, right? So there's many different ways that somebody can identify. And again, if you think about all the different Hispanic countries and Latino countries, I can't remember how many now, I should know, right? I think 21 maybe. That there's so many different cultures. If you go back to Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, Mexico, Cuba, all the countries, right? There's each one has its own different culture. And so all of those cultures are going to affect someone's decision making. And so now you have all those other different layers of complexity. And so that's just something to think about. And then you add on top of that, are they a Gen Zer? Are they a Gen Xer? Are they a millennial? What generation are they, right? And then are they multilingual? Are they bilingual? Are they trilingual? Are they immigrant status, non-immigrant, foreign-born, native-born? So now you start multiplying all these different layers of complexity. And people identify in different ways. And so they have all these sub-layers of culture that affect their decision making. And we get into the unseen behaviors of cultural groups. So communities bring distinct perspectives, traditions, and ways of knowing that shape how they view and interact with the world. And that's kind of just what I was talking about. If you think of any of those Latino countries, not only the culture, but the perspectives, the traditions that come along with those cultures and those histories, and their understanding of wealth and success often goes beyond money, focusing on relationships, well-being, experiences, and shared values. So this is also something to think about when we talk about wealth to somebody that means finance. If we say wealth to somebody else, that means relationships, wealth in relationships. That means wealth in well-being. That means wealth in experiences. That means wealth in values or wealth in successes, life successes. It doesn't necessarily mean money. So that's something we need to understand too. So if we don't talk about generational wealth, but just wealth as that word by itself, we have to understand that to some people that means money, and to some people that means something else. So uh, what does it mean to us individually? So if it means something different than finances, financial success or financial stability, that's okay, that's fine. We just need to get it clear in our heads. What is it we're going after? What is it we want? What is it we're looking for? How are we defining each of these terms, and what do those look like for us and for our family and for the future? Okay, so why culture should be considered family financial guidance and learning. So here we go. So what is it? It's the process through which families teach and pass down financial values, practices, and knowledge, shaping how individuals handle money and make financial decisions. As I mentioned earlier, if you watch those documentaries about those rich guys from the past, there's even some on some rich ladies, but just some of those names, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, how they amassed all their hundreds of millions, and this was, 150 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever, however long that was. Um, they passed down their financial values. And think about that, not just personal values, but financial values. And what are those? What do those mean? But how they use their money, why they use their money the way they do, what their money does for them, what their money produces, what their money returns, and then how they use that. And so all the rules about money, they have rules. They had rules about money. They had values about money that they practiced with their knowledge about money. That's how they got the money they got. And they shared all that with their children, with their grandchildren, and they ensured that that knowledge kept getting passed down. That's how they achieved generational wealth. Contrast that to what Latinos do, which is practically nothing, practically zero. Well, that's why Latinos are where they're at. How many Hispanic Latino names are right up there with Carnegie and Ford and Bezos, whoever else, right? Why it matters. This guidance reflects a family's culture, beliefs, and priorities influencing long-term financial behaviors and the ability to adapt to broader economic systems. So, as I mentioned, you think about our previous generations, the older generations, Hispanics, Latinos, when they're older in their older years, and they're living in their little homes and they have their little salaries or pensions or government assistance, whatever it is, coming in to their bank account, they're able to survive, thankfully, and they're okay, but they don't have a lot of money. And so the younger family members, the younger generation see that and they internalize that, and that becomes their priority. The priority becomes it's okay to uh, spend on the here and now as opposed to the long term because I'll still be okay. Grandma, grandpa, abuelita, abuelito, they're okay. They're still here. They're still with us. They don't have a lot of money, but they're still okay. They're still here. They're still with us. People have to chip in all the time. People have to buy them groceries, but they're still with us. They still smile, and that's okay. Life could be better. It's like I said, you can plan short term and long term at the same time. That's possible. That's okay. That's probably better than just planning for the short term and not the long term. So that's what we're trying to get across. That's adapting to the broader economic systems. It's those are fancy words for just saying it's okay to plan for both at the same time. So, reflection and growth, how do these cultural scripts show up for me? Are they serving me in my financial decisions and planning? So, we've given a lot of examples. We've talked about some stories about how these cultural decisions have influenced us, what we've seen in the past, and what we've seen influence people's decision making, especially financial decisions. Danita, anything else jump out at you real quick before we move on? Just anything else you want to share about financial decisions or things you've seen or heard in the past that kind of ring a bell and jump out at this point?
No, I just think that I think all the financial decisions or lack thereof
Hmm.
that were made by older generations, right? We're seeing them uh, more right now in the generations today, in the 18 and 19 and 20 year olds, how I
Hmm.
mean they're impacting them
Hmm.
today gravely because of everything that is going on, yeah, across
Right.
the
Yeah.
US, right? And they're being the most affected based on um, the lack of like all the financial planning, like the lack of the generation wealth, right? That um, older generations like really didn't do that. And I hope that generation millennials, right, take a different approach and begin. And I'm actually grateful that that we are beginning to have this type of trainings, right? Because this is where we can begin to change the mindset, right, in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. Yeah, things only get more expensive. Prices only go
Mm.
up, right? They hardly ever go down. So for those of you all out there that are listening that are in your 20s or 30s right now, how expensive are things going to be when you are in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? So if you're not saving now for then, you're going to have even less money when things are even more expensive, right? And so that's the point we're trying to get across. Yes, it's important to live a good life and and have money in the here and now and celebrate and go to those parties and contribute, and that's good. But you've also got to plan for your financial future, for your children's financial future, and if you're somebody who does want to create generational wealth, well, then that's, like I said, that's a completely different mindset. And that's a totally different set of actions and education that you have to undergo in order to get there. And you pretty much have to reinvent your identity at that point. And
And yeah,
so,
and I was gonna
yeah.
say, and at least some like this generation may
Mhm.
be still benefiting from Social Security. Who
Mhm.
is to know that Social Security millennials will even have that?
Right. Yeah, may not. Yeah. A lot of people think it won't be around after so many years, whatever, 20, 30 years or whatever. So, and it may not be. I mean, 'cause, the country is, I don't know how many trillions in debt. So, and
Yeah,
that's been a long time coming. That's been
yeah,
every president for decades, but so who knows? Yeah. Social
yeah.
Security at some point may go away, but um, so I like this graph because I think it's a perfect example of what we've been talking about all this whole time. It's a very, very simple graph, and you can see this graph is so the blue line, the blue portion is total principal. This is an investment graph. This is a retirement graph. And the green line is the total interest. So you can see the total balance at the very top, the top right, the total is $1,047,000. So it's basically $1 million. And you can see that the blue, the total principal, so this is the amount that a person, this is computer model generated, but so if you were to start, if any person was to start at age 22 and assume that they put in $200 a month, only $200 a month until retirement age at age 62, so for 40 years, they would have $1 million, and they themselves would only have contributed $110,000. And the financial institution, whatever financial institution that they banked with, would have contributed over $900,000, $936,000 of compound interest. And for those of you all that remember how compound interest works, that's the money that they give you, basically, that they just give you for banking with them, right? So it's basically 9 to 1. Who out there would not want those kinds of odds? Who would not want the 9 to 1 odds? Who out there would not want someone to give you $9 for every $1 you put down? For every $1 you put into savings, somebody else gives you $9. Who would not want that? Who out there is going to say, no, 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 please don't give me your money. Please don't give me your $9 to every $1 of mine. I don't want your money, right? So if you were to show this chart to a random Hispanic Latino, what kind of reaction would you get? Would it be, no, 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 that's not for me. I don't believe in that stuff. Or would it be, oh, wow, yeah, I want that deal. I think it depends on who you talk to, right? I'm pretty confident there's some of the older generation would be very skeptical. They'd go, oh, no, 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 that's not for me. I don't believe in that. right? Something's they're lying to you. That'll never happen, right? That can't be true, right? They'll find some way to talk themselves out of it. But maybe some of the newer, younger generation would go, "Oh, wow, that's amazing! Who would have thought? I didn't even know. No one's ever showed me this. No one's ever taught me this. This is part of financial education." And they'd say, "I want a piece of that," you know. So remember, and these are very small numbers too. This is only putting in $200 a month. Imagine if you put in 250 or 300 or 400. If you put in 400, you'd be at $2 million, right? Um, so, and again, there are a multitude of financial calculators online, all for free that you can find. You can probably find 1,001 different free financial calculators, investment calculators online that you can play around with yourself and find, enter all kinds of different numbers, different points of interest and different times and all this stuff. But I like to show this one as just a small piece of education, financial education, just to show somebody that even with very small numbers, with $200 a month, uh, the return you're getting is 9 to 1. And not many young folks have seen this type of information before. And so, of course, they're overwhelmed and they want to invest as soon as possible. Yeah, but Danita, anything you'd like to add about this type of information?
Yeah, no, I think that I mean, some if you showed this to somebody, they'd be like, "What is that?"
Hmm.
Right? But no, I think that's more information on investing, right? And what
Hmm.
does it mean? It's definitely something that we need to uh, promote and change the mentality. So I think we need more of this.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So the next one. So, why should we consider culture in financial success? So, there must be a balance between cultural expectations and cultural needs. We kind of sort of touched on that a little bit, kind of going back to it's okay to plan for the short term and the long term. But we also have to understand that it's okay to talk about money. You know, uh, I remember growing up when I was little being told you don't talk about money. I mean, you just don't talk about it. I remember being told that. I remember hearing that many times, not just once or twice, but many times. You don't talk about it. You don't talk about money. People don't talk about money. You just don't talk about it, right? And so, well, how are we ever going to learn? How do we learn about it? How do we become successful? How do we set up ourselves for success? How do we set up our families for success? How do we ensure that we're going to be okay in the long term? I mean, if we're going to live to be 80, 90, 100, how are we going to ensure that we can live comfortably, that we can have a living, that we can pay for things, right? That we can give to our families, to our children, to our grandchildren, to our great grandchildren? How are we're going to need money to live that long. Uh, and if we want to create just generational wealth, we're going to have to work a lot more than just for ourselves. So, so we have to change that mentality, that mindset that the culture has instilled in us that we just don't talk about it. Well, why not? We should. I mean, that's how the people who created generational wealth, that's how they created generational wealth. They talk about it and they learn about it. They educate themselves, they educate their children. There are financial educators out there. There are financial analysts. There are financial um, uh, the uh, I'm losing the term right now, but those people you can go to for help to financial planners. There are financial planners you can go to, right? Who can help educate you about your finances. So go to them. It's okay to talk about it. The next one, without awareness of cultural scripts, behavior change cannot happen. So we have to first of all, we have to know that all this comes from our culture, right? And we have to know that if we want to change that, we have to take action, right? We have to acknowledge that, okay, the reason I feel this way, or the reason I think this way, or the reason I understand this to be the way it is because of my culture. So I acknowledge that, I understand it, I know where it comes from, And I want something different for myself, and that's okay. I want to be able to support my family. I want my family to live not in an average house, but in a larger house. I want not an average car, but a better than average car. I don't want my kid to go to an average school. I want my kids to go to a better than average school, whatever. And that's okay. We have to talk about it and understand, be okay with that, and understand that that is okay. If that's what we want, then that's fine. Don't let people talk down to us or shame us, as Danita pointed out. Don't let people shame us for wanting something better for our kids or for wanting to have a new house instead of a 60, 70, 80-year-old house that was passed down from two generations, three generations, or same thing with a car. The reason you have the car is because it was your dad's car, or your grandpa's car. That's the only reason you have the car versus being able to buy a new car. Ay, ¿quién se cree, right? Who do they think they are, right? Because, oh, look, they have a new car, they have a new house, they can send their kids to that college or this college. Don't let people shame you for wanting better or wanting better for your kids. You have to talk about that. You have to talk about it. And lastly, financial literacy begins at the family and cultural level, which is what we're saying here. It's okay to not just talk about it, but talk to your family about it. Talk to your extended family about it. Those people who do the shaming, talk to them about it. Say, hey, why are you shaming somebody for wanting to give better to their kids? Do you not want to give better to your kids? Right? Or why are you shaming somebody for wanting to educate themselves? Why is that bad? For wanting to have an education, for wanting to know something, right? For wanting to be
Yeah,
able to
I
provide.
was gonna say, I think the response, to those comments should be, you know
Yeah.
what it took to get that,
Mhm.
how I got that, or how I was
Mhm.
able to buy an expensive car, then,
Mhm.
then like provide a response that said, yeah, in order for me to do that, I had to do this and this, I had to go to school, so that you can,
Mhm.
instead of like, because some when it has happened, somebody will say, oh, that's a nice car. I said, yeah. I was like, that's why I had to have two jobs.
Mm.
It took for me to 20 years in the military,
Yeah.
to get that in a full-time job after that,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, I think like you said, without awareness, right, and even our culture, when we keep ourselves down as shaming, I think that's why we don't generate generational wealth. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and something that parents can do with their kids is, kids like to say a lot, "I'm bored," right? Even when kids have all the toys that they have and all the games that they have and whatever, and kids always say, "Oh, I'm bored," right? Well, when they do that, what the parents ought to do is say, "Come here, let's learn together," and you sit them down and pull up a financial education video and say, "We're going to learn about money. We're going to learn about investing." We're going to
Mm,
learn about generational wealth. We're going to learn about entrepreneurship. We're going to learn about finances. We're going to learn about something, right? But that's how parents can get involved instead of just telling their kids, oh, well, go play this or go play that or go do this or go do that. Parents can say, come here, we're going to learn together so that we can talk about this. Because if the parent is not as educated or as up to speed on all these different things, then they can't educate the kids. But if they learn together, then they can talk about it. Then they can have the conversations about it. And then they both get more educated about it. And then the child is better set up for success later. So that's
yeah, it's like
something.
normalize
Mhm.
the topic, right?
Right. Yes. And they should, yeah, it should become normalized. It really should. Because again, going back to people who have wealth, that is their life. That is what they
Hmm.
do. That is what they talk about. That's what they live and eat and breathe. So it's normalized for them. That's why they have wealth, because it's normalized. And so again, contrast that to a typical Latino, Hispanic family where that is not normalized. Well, then they
Hmm.
don't have wealth because that's not normalized. So, the proof is right there visible for all of us to
Yeah,
see. The facts are there. You can't argue that. You can't dispute that. So if you want your children to have financial success, or financial wealth, you have to normalize talking about money and wealth and investing and all those things.
Yeah, and I, it's my mental health brain comes into play in this
Hmm.
because we often talk about suicide prevention, we talk
Hmm.
about sexual harassment and, sexual assault, and if we don't normalize those topics and
Hmm.
openly discuss them, we can't talk about them, right? Because it's a taboo, right?
Hmm.
So if
Right.
we don't have those conversations, right, we can discuss, hey, this is what's happening, this has happened here, right? Or
Hmm.
even mental health, depression, this and that, right? We can't talk about it because, especially in Latino households, right? It's like,
Yeah.
mira, está loca, right? It's like,
Hmm.
"Ay, no, no estás, so if you don't talk about, oh, okay, fue al banco, like the investments, that I'm watching the stocks and this and that, right?
Yeah.
That you, but like you said, those that have generational wealth,
Hmm.
they have an app on their phone and they're watching the stocks and they're talking about all those things. And yeah, that's what they live and breathe.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so talking about going back a little bit to our culture, our Latinidad, cultural attributes, and shared practices that connect the experiences of people with the backgrounds from different parts of Latin America to the United States. So this is, kind of the undercurrent of what we've been talking about. Culture is about raíces, deeply rooted traditions, beliefs, values, behaviors, and the history and language of a particular group of people. So we've touched on all of these things. We've touched on kind of the traditions, the beliefs, the values, behaviors of how and why some of the reasons we got to where we are as Latinos, as Hispanics, about where we are with our finances. Some of us, it's because we were just taught you don't talk about it, right? Some of us, it's something else, right? Or some of us maybe we're taught about it. It's like, hey, this is what investing is. You should start early or whatever, right? Everybody's in a different situation. And there's different reasons. There's layers and layers of different reasons, the traditions, beliefs, values, behaviors, and there's more, right? But so that's something to understand. That's how the culture comes into play here. And we're all from different Latin American countries or perhaps even beyond, Spain or somewhere else. But and so those cultures play a different part in our understanding and our execution of of our finances, right? In our decision making of our finances and how the family comes into play as well. So when we talk about leading authentically regarding our financial future, our financial success, you see on the far left here the Latinidad, our colectivismo, the we versus I, the Latinidad. So again, that's very much centered around the familismo, right? Simpatía, group results, right? All of that is thinking about the collective, thinking about the family, thinking about the group, right? That's the Hispanic Latino culture. On the far right, you see the USA societal norms, right? It's I versus we. It's very individualized, very centered around the individualism. Um, People are more reserved as opposed to not really thinking about the family group dynamic. They're more thinking about themselves. The personal space, we hear that a lot, right? Personal space, give me my personal space. But in the Latino, Hispanic, it's all about, hey, hugs, hugs, hugs. Oh, we're getting close, right? On the USA societal norms, very much about boundaries, right? The individual results, right? What have you done for me lately, right? We've all heard that. Clock oriented, right? We clock in, we clock out. We're on the clock, right? That's the USA societal norms, right? So those are just some ways, those are just a few ways of how we contrast. Now, when you bring some of that together in the middle, when you mix these two, right? When you talk about the Hispanic Americans, the middle part there, making personal connections, team players, empathy and inclusion, preferences for mentoring opportunities. So these are not only pertinent to the workplace, but in family dynamics as well. So again, if you think about personal connections, yes, of course you have personal connections with your immediate family members, but if you think about outside, say your extended family members, or again, say everybody in your neighborhood is a compadre, right? Because they're in your neighborhood, right? It's going back to personal connections, right? Team player, right? So it's okay to be an I, but it's also okay to be we, so you can go back and forth between thinking about I and we because you're a team player, right? So when it benefits you, when it benefits the team or the group, you can go back and forth. It doesn't always have to be only one or the other. Empathy and inclusion. Remember, you can still take everyone's viewpoint into account, everyone's thoughts and feelings into account, but you still need to make your own decision. And that's something that this current generation is very good at, this millennial generation and beyond, the Gen Z generation specifically. They're real good at the empathy and inclusion, real good at listening to everybody's individual opinions and then being able to still have their own feelings and opinions and make their own decision. So preference for mentoring opportunities, that's of course specific to the workplace, but that's something that the current generation is really wanting. Opportunities to help others. Again, everybody's looking for those, and appreciation of diversity. Of course, that's mostly with the current generation, a little bit less as you go further back, but even as you go further back, there's still appreciation for diversity. So we've come to the end of our presentation. You see on the left a QR code to visit our website at El Puente Institute. We are a division of the Bridgify Group. You can visit either or both of our websites. And on the right, a QR code for our LinkedIn for El Puente Institute. So at this point, Danitza, I guess I'm not sure how much time we have, but we can open it up for questions, or we could have some further in-depth conversation, or wherever we want to go at this point.
Yeah, I'm unmuting myself. Okay, yeah, no, thank you. I think this was great. I really hope that um, if somebody is watching on LinkedIn, I don't see any questions, but I'm not sure on YouTube. I don't think we get any questions on YouTube as well. But I know we usually have a lot of viewers after the fact, and if we have any questions, I'll go ahead and post them to you guys' link on LinkedIn. I know Patty and you're always looking at them there. But this was great. It even, it was even great for me. I wasn't able to go to the symposium in December last year, but this was great. It's very relevant to today, and I hope that a lot of the millennials watch it, and the parents of a lot of people right now are listening because this is very important, and even for some Gen Zs and other generations, right? There's still time.
Yes, yeah. And so, yeah, folks can definitely reach out if they have any questions. And again, hopefully they can connect with us on our website or LinkedIn. Happy to connect with folks and looking forward to future training events.
Absolutely. And to everybody out listening and viewing and watching, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, and keeping your financial readiness, right? And learning about how our culture and your origin does play a role. And I hope you're walking away with practical tools, motivation, and a stronger mindset on how our Latino culture plays a role in, just for best managing your finances. Before we wrap up, I just want to give again a heartfelt thank you, Dr. Leo, from El Puente Institute for this incredible leadership and commitment to empowering, again, our communities through educational and personal growth. We appreciate every one of you for showing up and investing in your future wellness and the generations that you are leading in the future. Until the next time, keep striving, keep learning, and keep building the life you deserve. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again. And please be sure to follow El Puente and ANSO on our social media platforms. Thank you.